You know, sometimes life doesn't warn you before it knocks the breath right out of your chest. I remember the moment so clearly, too clearly, really. My arm was throbbing, hanging in a way no arm should ever hang, and every heartbeat felt like it was punching the inside of my skin. But I was standing there trying to stay upright, trying not to let the pain explode out of my mouth. And right in the middle of all that chaos, my little girl walked up to me with those big, curious eyes she has. She tugged my shirt gently, like she always does when she wants me to lean down. I thought she was going to ask me what happened, or if I was hurt, or maybe even cry because she saw the fear in my face. But no, she looked up at me, calm as a summer morning, and said, "Daddy taught me something today." I froze. I blinked. I didn't know what she meant. What could I have possibly taught her when I was barely staying conscious, trying not to let the pain take me under? But she stood there waiting, like she had just delivered the most important news in the world. And maybe she had. Because in that moment, everything stopped. The noise, the confusion, even the pain loosened its claws for a second. It was as if heaven pressed pause just so I could hear her little voice properly. Now, let me tell you something. Children have a way of seeing right past the mess. They don't get distracted by what's happening on the outside. They look straight into the heart of a moment. And as I stood there, hurting and confused, she kept smiling at me, like she saw something good happening instead of something terrible. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but the words were stuck somewhere in my throat, blocked by shock, and maybe a little fear. Because when a child says something that deep, you know heaven is somewhere close by, whispering through them. The strange thing is, while I was trying to figure out how to stay strong, I didn't realize she had been watching me. Really watching me. She saw every breath I tried to steady, every whisper of prayer that escaped without me even knowing, every moment I tried to keep my spirit from collapsing even though my body already had. She saw something in me I didn't even know I was showing. And isn't that just like children? They don't wait for a teaching moment. They catch the lessons we're not even aware we're giving. So when she said, "A daddy taught me something today," the world felt like it slowed down long enough for me to understand that the moment wasn't about my broken arm at all. It was about what I chose to do while it was breaking, what posture my heart took in the middle of the pain. I didn't know she was standing close enough to feel the shift when I whispered, "Oh, Lord, help me." I didn't know she noticed how I breathed through the fear instead of letting it own me. I didn't know she saw worship in me when all I felt was weakness. But she did. And to her young little heart, that counted as learning. I'm telling you, pain might have been the loudest thing in the room that day, but heaven still found a way to speak through her. And sometimes that's all it takes. One sentence from a child to reveal what God was doing behind the curtain the whole time. When I tell you that pain has a way of trying to take over the whole room, I mean it. That day, when my arm was broken, it wasn't just the bone that felt cracked. My thoughts were scattered. My breath was tight. And my mind kept trying to run ahead into fear. You know how it is when something sudden hits you hard. Your first instinct is to ask, "Oh, why me? Why now?" And trust me, for a split second, that question tried to rise up inside me too. But right there in that moment, when everything in me wanted to panic, something deeper whispered back, and just breathe and look up. I didn't sing a song. I didn't raise my hands. I didn't speak in a loud voice. It was quieter than that, so quiet it might have slipped by unnoticed if heaven hadn't been paying attention. But inside, where my thoughts and pain were wrestling, I made a choice. I said, "Lord, I don't understand this, but I trust you." It wasn't pretty or poetic. It was survival. Sometimes that's what worship looks like. Not a performance, not a big emotional moment, but a tiny, trembling decision in the middle of fear. And you know what surprised me? The pain didn't disappear, but it stopped being the only thing I could hear. There was a calming that settled in my chest, like someone had opened a window in a room that had been suffocating. The situation was still the same, my arm still broken, my voice still shaking, but there was a peace that didn't belong to the situation. It wasn't logical peace. It was heaven's peace. Heaven's peace, the kind that doesn't wait for things to get better before it shows up. In moments like that, you understand things differently. you begin to see that worship isn't about the condition of your body, but the condition of your heart. Anyone can praise when life feels good and everything is working the way it should. But when bones are breaking, when life twists you unexpectedly, when fear tries to drown your thoughts, that's when real worship is born. It shows up not because you feel strong, but because you've run out of strength and you're leaning on a power that isn't yours. And the strangest thing about it is this: the more you lean into God during pain, the less the pain controls you. It doesn't own your attitude. It doesn't dictate your reaction. It doesn't decide the direction of your spirit. I didn't realize it at the time, but my daughter was watching that battle. She saw a mother standing there, hurting yet steady, afraid yet anchored. And she saw that worship isn't something you save for church. It's something that finds you right in the middle of the storm. That quiet worship, those tiny whispered breaths, created an atmosphere around me that even a child could feel. And let me tell you, children know when something bigger than the moment is happening. They can sense when the room shifts. They might not have the words for it, but they can feel heaven settling near someone who chooses trust in the middle of chaos. I didn't have strength to lift my arm, but I had enough strength to lift my heart toward God. And that was enough. That tiny act, that soft surrender, invited something holy into a painful moment. I didn't plan it. I didn't even know I was doing it. Heaven knew. My daughter knew. And I knew, deep down, that worship had walked into the room long before the help arrived. Children have this way of seeing life that adults forget how to see. We get older, and suddenly everything has to make sense. Everything has to be explained. Everything has to be logical. But children, no, they see with something much clearer than logic. They see with the heart. The heart. And that day, when my arm was broken, I was trying my best not to fall apart. That little girl of mine was watching me with eyes that weren't focused on the pain, the panic, or the confusion. She was watching something else entirely. She was watching the way my spirit responded, the way my spirit responded. I didn't realize it then. Honestly, I wasn't thinking about being an example, or a teacher, or a guide. I wasn't thinking about how to behave in front of her. My mind was too busy trying to hold on to the little piece I had, trying to keep my breath slow so the pain wouldn't take over. But children don't need you to sit them down and give them a lesson for them. To learn something. They're always learning. Every second, every reaction, every sigh, every whisper, every choice we make in front of them. And sometimes it's the moments when we're least prepared that they pay the closest attention. She didn't look at my arm and see brokenness. She didn't look at my face and see fear. She didn't look at the situation and see danger. What she saw was how I held myself even when I didn't feel held. What she saw was how I whispered prayers without realizing my lips were moving. What she saw was how I didn't let the pain turn into anger, or panic, or bitterness. She saw something so quiet, so small, that even I didn't think it mattered. But to her, it was everything. Children don't just repeat what we tell them. They absorb what we show them. When we think they're too young to understand, they're storing away the exact things they'll remember when life tests them years later. And I'll tell you something. A child can recognize peace even when they don't have the words for it. They can sense when someone is standing in strength that doesn't match the situation. They can feel when something heavenly is sitting in the room. They can see what we forget to look for. The innocence of a child lets them see past the noise of a moment. Cool. Where an adult might have focused on the trauma, my daughter focused on the posture. She didn't learn about suffering that day. She learned about response. She didn't learn about pain. She learned about peace. She didn't learn about peace. She didn't learn about fear. She learned about trust. A broken arm didn't scare her nearly as much as a broken spirit would have, and thank God she didn't see one. And you know what really struck me later on? She wasn't impressed by strength. Children don't care about how strong you pretend to be. They care about how genuine you are. She didn't say, Mama didn't cry, or Mama was brave. No, she said, Daddy taught her something today, because what she saw wasn't bravery. It was faith. She saw the quiet decision to lean on God even when my body couldn't lean on anything else. She saw heaven in my weakness. She saw heaven in my weakness. She saw trust in my trembling. She saw worship in my whisper. And that little heart of hers recognized something holy even though she couldn't name it. And that's when it hit me. Children don't just see what's happening. They see what matters. There's something I learned that day, something I wasn't planning to learn, something I didn't even know I needed until it showed up. When pain hits you hard, when it knocks on your door without warning and walks right in like it owns the place, you don't expect anything good to follow behind it. You expect panic, fear, maybe even anger. You expect heaviness. But I'm telling you, right in the middle of all that hurt, something else walked into that room with me. Something bigger than the pain. Something quieter than fear. Something gentler than the panic I was trying to hold back. Heaven showed up. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of moment where the lights flicker and angels start singing. It was subtle, soft, almost like a brush of warm air passing through a cold room. And I didn't recognize it at first because I was too focused on the throbbing in my arm, on the way the world felt slanted, on trying to stay steady so my child wouldn't see me fall apart. But heaven doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't ask for your permission. It steps into the moment right when you need it most, sometimes before you even know you need it. I felt it in the way the room settled. I felt it when the panic loosened its grip. Just a little. I felt it in that strange calmness that wrapped itself around me like a blanket I didn't remember reaching for. It was almost like God leaned in close and said, "I'm here. I've been here the whole time." And when you feel that, everything changes. The pain doesn't vanish, but it loses its power. The fear doesn't disappear, but it stops being the loudest voice in the room. I've always believed that heaven is not as far away as we imagine. But that day made it real. That day showed me that heaven has no problem stepping into a messy moment, into a painful moment, even into a moment where you're standing there holding yourself together with nothing but a thin thread of prayer. When your heart chooses worship, even the smallest whisper of it, heaven draws near like it's been waiting for that invitation. And what's amazing is how obvious it becomes to the people around you, especially to children. They can sense a shift long before adults can. They can feel when a moment becomes sacred, even if they don't understand the reason. The air gets a little lighter. The room feels a little safer. And something about your presence feels different. Not because you're strong, but because God is standing close. My daughter felt that shift. She didn't have the words for it, but she felt it. And it's funny, because she wasn't paying attention to the injury or the chaos. She was paying attention to the atmosphere. Children have a way of noticing the presence of peace more than the presence of pain. And that's when I understood something I had heard all my life, but never truly lived. Heaven responds to worship, especially when it's offered from a broken place. The kind of worship that rises from pain carries a sound heaven recognizes immediately. And when heaven recognizes that sound, it comes running, it comes settling, it comes surrounding. That broken moment taught me that the presence of God is not limited to quiet mornings, church services, or peaceful days. It shows up in the middle of the storm, right when your voice is shaking, right when your spirit is tired, right when your body is hurting, right when everything in you feels vulnerable. And the moment it arrives, the whole atmosphere changes. There's a moment that happens after the shock settles, after the pain stops shouting, after the room stops spinning. It's the moment when clarity walks in, quiet but certain, and you finally start to understand what was really happening underneath everything you were feeling. That day, after my arm was broken and after my daughter said those unexpected words, I began to realize something I hadn't seen before. I had been so focused on holding myself together that I didn't understand what my child had been learning just by watching me. And slowly, like a sunrise creeping over the edge of the earth, the truth began to unfold. She wasn't just observing me, she was interpreting me, and what she saw in me shaped what she believed about God. We don't always think about it, but our reactions in moments of weakness preach louder sermons than any words we speak on good days. Children listen with their eyes. They study us with their hearts. And when life pushes us into uncomfortable, unexpected places, our true beliefs rise to the surface. I wasn't standing there trying to look holy or strong. I wasn't posing for anyone. I was just in pain, trying to stay steady, trying to breathe, trying to trust. But that quiet trust became a message she understood far better than any lesson. I could have sat her down and explained. It made me realize that children don't learn faith by watching us succeed. They learn it by watching how we stand when life knocks us down. They learn how to pray by hearing us whisper in the dark. They learn how to trust by watching us lean on God when nothing else around us feels stable. They learn where peace comes from, not when everything is perfect, but when everything is shaking. And yet, we refuse to fall apart. And here's the thing. We don't get to choose when God uses us to teach them. It won't always be on the day we're prepared. It won't always be when we feel strong. Sometimes God will use the very moment we feel most fragile to show a child what real faith looks like. Not polished faith. Not rehearsed faith. Raw, honest, trembling faith. The kind that doesn't hide the pain, but still refuses to let it control the spirit. I realized that day that my daughter wasn't learning about injury or fear. She was learning about response, about trust, about worship. And isn't that something? A child's first lessons in faith don't come from textbooks or sermons. They come from watching how the people they love respond when life gets hard. They come from observing whether we run toward God or away from Him when pain shows up. They come from seeing whether we choose bitterness or belief, panic or prayer, chaos or calm. And the truth is, children remember the way a moment feels more than what we say. They remember the atmosphere we create when life presses us. They remember whether peace or fear filled the room. And that becomes their blueprint. It becomes the model they hold in their hearts long after the moment passes. So when my daughter looked up and said, "Daddy taught her something today," I understood that she wasn't referring to something I explained. She was referring to something I lived. Something she saw in my weakness. Something heaven allowed her to witness so she could carry it into her own life. And that's when it hit me with a weight I wasn't expecting. Children don't wait for our strength to learn from us. They learn from our surrender. There comes a moment, after all the emotions settle and the story has had time to breathe, when you finally understand why it unfolded the way it did. You see, at first, I thought the whole situation was just about my arm being broken. About pain. About staying calm for my daughter. But as the days went by, and as her little words replayed in my mind, "Daddy taught her something today," I began to realize that it wasn't just a moment we lived through. It was a moment God orchestrated. It wasn't just a situation to overcome. It was a message being delivered. It wasn't just about hurt or healing. It was about heaven using a moment of weakness to reveal something stronger than any of us expected. And the more I reflected on it, the clearer it became that heaven had been speaking long before I understood what it was saying. Because sometimes God doesn't speak through thunder. Sometimes He speaks through timing. Through the innocence of a child. Through the posture of a heart under pressure. Through the way a painful situation forces us to choose trust over fear. And suddenly, you realize that no part of that day was random. Not the pain, not the calm, not the whisper of worship, not the little eyes watching, not the unexpected wisdom coming out of a child's mouth. It all connected. It all carried a message that was larger than the moment itself. God was teaching me that heaven doesn't waste anything. Not even the things that hurt. Not even the things that break. Not even the things we would never choose for ourselves. He takes the very moments that feel like they're falling apart and turns them into moments that fall into place. My daughter wasn't just repeating a sentence. She wasn't trying to sound wise. She was speaking from a place of revelation, the kind that only children can access with such purity. She saw something heaven wanted her to see. She learned something heaven wanted her to carry.